sure that your mic is on.
Ready? It's on. Yeah.
All right, joy to the world.
Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare in room, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. Joy, joy to the world, the Savior reigns. Lead all their songs in joy, while fields and floods, rocks, hills in praise. Repeat the sound in joy, repeat the sound in joy. Repeat, repeat the sound in joy. Sing with us, church. Joy. And joy. Unspeakable joy. And overflowing wind. And no tongue can tell. Joy. Unspeakable joy, it rises in my soul, never lets me go. He rules the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations through. The glories of His righteousness, and wonders of His love, and wonders of His love, and wonders of His love. Joy, joy, unspeakable joy, and overflowing wind, and no time can tell. And joy, unspeakable joy, rises in my soul, never lets me go.
Good morning, everyone. How are we? I feel like we still have more people in the lobby than we do in here. So if you're in the lobby and you can hear me, get in here. Good morning. All right. So we're going to have fun today. Did you come expecting to have some fun? All right. We got another word scramble. Let's see how we do. All right. All right. Let's see the first one. Major? I think I heard Joe first. That was good. That was quick. Let's see. Yes. Jesus was born there, right? So the story goes?
So the story goes.
Right. We weren't there, so we don't know. Yeah. All right, let's see. What's the next one? Ooh, wow. I love lights.
Love it.
I love the lights. It's like squirrels when I see the pretty lights. Yes, so much fun. All right. Next one. Bethlehem, who said that? Oh, Joe again. Jets fans are smart. Who knew?
They just can't play football, that's all.
Right. You know. All right, let's see the next one. Ooh, what is that?
I heard it.
Shepherds?
Joe, that was Joe again.
Ooh, we learned about them last week. No, we didn't. We learned about the Magi last week.
Yes, we did.
Sorry. All right. Next. Ooh. Is this stumping people? Carol, Shelley got that one. Good job. So much fun.
Well, that was our word scramble. That was fun. That was really fun.
Uh-huh.
The last one, believe it or not, when I was looking at the back, for some reason my brain said Carlos. I'm like, I don't know what that was about. I don't know what that was about. But welcome. We are a community of hope, faith, and love, and we're here to help people find their, because we believe you were created on. And I think I forgot the rest of it.
4A.
4A. You are for a purpose because you helped me remember
Woo,
that.
good job. Woo. His first time, give it up. All right. We want to welcome you into our community of faith. If you are new here, welcome. Hopefully we haven't scared you away yet, and you were able to get a little gift as you walked in as our, just to say thank you for showing up this morning. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to grab some of Mama Skinner's famous banana bread, because we like to hoard that and act like it's not here, but it is. All right, and if you are new, there are multiple ways to connect with us. First and foremost, we are a phone-friendly family here, so take out your cell phones and text the word welcome to 315-883-2213. That'll give you a digital connection card and a chance for us to just send you a small token of our appreciation in the mail. And you can also follow us on all forms of social media: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those good things. But E, what's the best way to stay connected?
The best way to stay connected is the Church Center app. The Church Center app is great. You can find it on your whatever app store that you use. You can keep track of events. You can give us your personal info. You can hook up with life groups, which are very important. You can give. There's so many things you can do with the Church Center app.
All right. And with that being said, we have a couple events coming up. Today is the last day of open house at Mama Skinner's. Have you been there yet, E?
I have not.
All right, well, I suggest you go and go hungry. From 1 to 3 today, Mama Skinner is again graciously opening up her home. She's feeding us. The food is always phenomenal. And she has the nativity tree. It is spectacular, shown there with her little book. Everything on there is about the nativity, things she has made, stories she can tell you. I got to experience it last week, and there were things on there that I was like, why is that there? But then you read, and she tells you, and it's amazing. And, you know, one of my ornaments lives there. That's what we're just going to put that there. Anyways. We had yesterday holidays at Love Handles. That was amazing. I don't know if we have any photos of that, but such a fun time. We do. Oh, I think we do. Can we see photos of that? There's my mug. And all of our other elves. We just had so much fun loving on the community with Mr. and Mrs. Claus. We had carolers and cookie making. It was just so much fun. We had families that have come to all of our events, to come year over year, new families. So it was just an amazing time with all of us together to give back to the community.
Awesome.
And then we're talking about parties. We have the best party ever coming up. Want to tell us about that?
Yes, we do. For Christmas Eve, we are doing the best gift ever. Jesus is the best gift ever. He's given us so many things. So please come to the party, come join us, and we can celebrate Jesus, and we can do, we can really join in the festivities and really enjoy it.
Yes, please invite your friends. It is not too late. They say something like 50% of people don't come to a church event or something like this because they don't get invited. So invite. We have little cards still to hand out. Let's make it the best party ever, so we can talk about it from years to come. And last but not least, if you're a child, you can head up upstairs with our volunteers in the back, and we're going to continue with our gathering.
there you are. Got the coffees. Land of Goshen, that line was long. All right, couple of coffees. Tobias, here's yours with extra goat milk. Had to smell that the whole way here. Thank you so much. And I have a juniper tea. Which one of you guys had the juniper tea with 2 extra shots of honey, huh? You look like the juniper. And an extra large boba tea for me, because I made the run. And it's all good. Ira, if you will. Guys, where's all the sheep?
Zeke, come back! No, thank you! We're not making this up!
Oh, you're not making this up? Oh, golly gee then, Eamon. Then maybe I will believe that, what, a gaggle of angels came down?
Technically, they're called heavenly hosts.
Not the time, Tobias.
It's always the time for proper nomenclature.
That's the motto I live by.
Fine. A heavenly host of little cherubs.
No. Not little. They were humongous.
Yeah, Ira buckled like a newborn lamb.
I might have a new concussion. I taste pennies right now.
Okay. Come on, ladies. Sweepy.
Zeke, we're leaving the sheep.
Bathsheba. Bathsheba.
The angel told us where to find the Messiah.
Figures. Figures the angels would tell you and not me. You want to know why? Because I am always left out of things. I am left out every time.
That's not true.
It is so true. How about the time that I stayed back and I watched the sheep while you all went to go chase those wolves for that farmer? And what did you get in return? A year's worth of free olive oil!
You guys remember that olive oil?
Remember when we put them on those crackers?
Hey, hey, how about the time that I missed out on that amazing water spout at the Sea of Galilee because I was searching for herbs for Ira's weak stomach?
Can we just say my stomach was disappointed in me?
Fine. Fine. Then riddle me this. How about the time that my best friend forgot to tell me about Tobias' surprise birthday dinner for some strange oversight of, forgetting that I exist? I am left out of everything, so why shouldn't I be left out of this? The Messiah. I guess he's just leaving me out too. Get off me! Stop it! Not the face! Leave me alone! Stop! Zeke! Stop! You stop! Zeke!
Come here, listen to me. Listen to me! Listen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you missed out on so much. That's on us. But today, in the town of David, the Savior was born to us, to all of us. I can't let you miss out on that.
Well, better not keep that baby waiting. Idea? Pit stop for more boba teas on the way?
Not a chance.
Good morning, Forward Point. How's everybody doing today? Yeah, my name is Jimmy. I'm one of the pastors here, and it's great to be with you. Hard to believe we are T-minus 7 days from Christmas Eve. So as was already mentioned, if you don't have plans, we would love to have you join us for Christmas Eve next Sunday this time, but also in the evening. We have a special gathering that's going to take place at 6 o'clock, and we're looking forward to being together for that and being able to be a blessing in our community. Growing up, I have always been around animals. I don't know if you are a dog person or a cat person. If you are a dog person, you probably also are an iPhone person. If you're a cat person, you're also probably an Android person. And we know where you guys belong, but I've always been a dog person. And my parents, growing up, raised Pekingese. And I don't know if you're familiar with the animal Pekingese, but they're little itty-bitty dogs, and they have flat faces. All right, you think of a dog, you probably think of a snout and a nose. Well, Pekingese have a flat face, and anytime they're breathing heavily, getting up off their chubby bodies or just, trying to get on the couch, they snort because their face is so, I'm surprised you don't have a Pekingese, Sonia. You guys would be a match made in heaven there together. You'd be able to blame it on the dog. But that's what they do. So we've gone through different periods where we would have lots of animals. We had 5 Pekingese, but my parents bred them. So every once in a while, one of them would get pregnant, and we'd go through this time where the time would come for the dog to give birth, and we'd have these little itty-bitty Pekingese animals that would come out. And I don't know if you've ever seen a birth of a dog. It's kind of a weird thing, and they come out like a sack, and I won't explain it to you. It gets a little gross, but it's awesome to see that kind of thing. But I had always had a dream dog of having a husky. I don't know if you have a dream dog, but my dream dog was always having a husky. And I remember the first time I decided, I'm going to get a gift for my wife. And isn't that usually how guys do it? If you're going to get a gift for your wife, you get her something that you really want. So I got her a husky. It was going to be our first dog in Indiana when we were in Indiana. And I went and I got her a husky. And we brought it back. And let me tell you, this thing had to be the stupidest animal that has ever walked the planet. Every time I see huskies, I see like noble creatures. They're pulling a dog sled, right? Like they're very calm and sedated. And this dog just acted like it was all sorts of screwed up from top to bottom. It would constantly pee inside, could never figure out how to pee outside. The moment it would get outside, it would just run. I mean, it was the most stubborn dog that we had ever met. And I said, you know what? We have got to get rid of this thing because I cannot handle this. So we met a guy one day. He's walking, and he's got like 3 huskies he's walking. And I'm thinking, hey, do you want a husky? And we gave it to this guy, and so let it be, right? Fast forward a few years later, we're back here in New York, and we're thinking, you know what? We might be ready for a dog again, but we don't want a big husky like we had before. We're going to try to downsize a little bit, and we decide we're going to get a Pomsky. I don't know if you know what a Pomsky is, but a Pomsky is a husky that has bred with a Pomeranian, okay? Don't try to figure that out in your head because it's probably just going to mess you up. But you have this big dog and this little dog. Somehow they get together and they create these Pomskys, and they are the cutest looking little puppies in the whole wide world. If you saw one, you would want one just because you think it's the cutest thing in the whole wide world. So we decide, we go out to New York City for Christmas one year, and on the way back, we're going to stop in Long Island, and we pick up a Pomsky. And wouldn't you know, I think we got the stupidest, craziest Pomsky known to man. This thing just did not listen. It did not obey. It just ran the moment it saw freedom, and we'd have to go chase it. And thankfully, the Lord called us to move from Lincourt here into Eastwood. And during that process, we had to live with the friends of ours, the cooks. And we thought, you know what, we could not bring this dog with us. That would just be too much on top of our 6-member family. So we said, Mom and Dad, how would you guys like a dog? And they decided to take our Pomsky. His name is Olaf. And crazy thing, here we are just a few weeks ago, and my kids come to me and they said, Dad, Grandma and Grandpa, they think that Ginger, who is Olaf's wife, we brought in, they have 2 of them now, they think that Ginger is pregnant. And I'm thinking, okay, what makes you think that the dog is pregnant? Well, she's kind of getting heavier, and it seemed like Olaf was just getting heavier, and they thought maybe they were eating a lot, but she's kind of acting kind of funny. And then here we are 2 weeks later. Last night, a couple nights ago, little Ginger gave birth to 3 boy Pomskys. Now this has got to be the best setup because my kids can go across the street, see all the cuteness, and then they get to come back home without any animals. I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. We are not having any animals here at the house, but 3 strapping boys. They look like mole rats. Let's be honest. They look like mole rats. But any moment, any day, they will start to their hair will kind of. I think they put their paw in the light socket and they kind of get poofed, and they will turn into the most cute, adorable things. I don't know if my parents are going to sell them or what they're planning on doing, but that has kind of been what our life has revolved around over the past few days is these new little born Pomskys that are across the street. Well, if you just joining us here this morning, we are in the middle of a series talking about Christmas, surprise, surprise, and we've been kind of diving into this idea found in the book of Matthew of where the angel is talking to Joseph and kind of gives him a sneak peek at coming events, right? And the big thing is he's telling, this is what is going to happen, Joseph, is that this baby that Mary's going to have under these kind of crazy circumstances, you're going to name him Jesus because he's going to save, meaning God saves because he, not us, not you and I, he is going to save his people from their sins. If you came here this morning, whether you want to admit it or not, you have sins, I have sins. We all need saving, and that's why Jesus came. But here's the cool thing. The life that he would live, he's going to live in such a way that the people who he's around are going to kind of give him a nickname. They're going to call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. It's not going to just be God from a distance, way up in the sky, kind of, instituting this plan that he's going to put into place and just let it happen all on its own. He's actually going to move into the neighborhood, and people are going to call him Emmanuel, God with us. And that's where we started. And then last week we talked about the Magi, and these guys are probably some of the more shady characters of the story. Over years, it's kind of been dolled up, and they're kings or they're wise men. But the reality is they come as descendants from Daniel, out of this group of people who are enchanters and sorcerers. But they decided to listen and to follow the prophecies of Daniel some 600 years prior, and they're looking for the star, and they follow, and they're just mesmerized by what they see. And they bring the gifts, right? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I saw this picture earlier. If it was 3 wise women instead of 3 wise men, that the gifts probably would have been a little different. Probably would have been some diapers and some casseroles and some formula, right? A little bit more helpful in that situation. But this morning, we're going to kind of change gears and jump into the book of Luke, and we're going to be talking about the nativity story through the eyes of the shepherds. So if you want to turn in your Bibles there, in Luke, we're going to read through it, and then we're going to kind of dive in. It starts off this way. It says, "There were shepherds camping in the neighborhood, and they had set night watches over their sheep. Suddenly, God's angels stood among them, and God's glory blazed around them, and they were terrified. The angel said, 'Don't be afraid. I'm here to announce a great and joyful event that is meant for everybody. Worldwide, a Savior has just been born in David's town, a Savior who is Messiah and Master. And this is what you're to look for: a baby wrapped in a blanket and lying in a manger.' And at once the angel was joined by a huge angelic choir singing God's praises. 'Glory to God in the heavenly heights, peace to all men and women on earth who please him.' As the angel choir withdrew into heaven, the shepherds talked it over. 'Let's get over to Bethlehem as fast as we can and see for ourselves what God has revealed to us.' They left, running, and found Mary and Joseph and the baby lying in the manger. Seeing was believing. They told everyone that they met what the angels had said about this child, and all who heard the shepherds were impressed. Mary kept all these things to herself, holding them dear deep within herself. And the shepherds returned and let loose, glorifying and praising God for everything that they had heard and seen. It turned out exactly the way that they had been told." Now, Luke is the only account of the shepherds that we have. Just like Matthew was the only account of the Magi, Luke is the only account of from the shepherd's perspective. And we start right at the beginning with this idea that there were these shepherds camping in the neighborhood. And you kind of already gotten a perspective of the shepherds from the movie that played beforehand. Is the shepherds had to kind of conduct their business outside of normal life and goings and comings. Their job was to tend and to rear the sheep, to raise them up for different purposes. And shepherding, really one of the oldest professions known to man. Part of their role, however, was to also work with these cute but also very dumb sheep. And sometimes we've seen throughout the course of the time, shepherds have also relied on some very cute dogs. One of my dream dogs, again, I saw this video. I'd like to introduce you to Hoover. Hoover is an animal shepherd dog who just was sold for $32,000 because of his ability with sheep. When I got my Husky and my Pomsky, I did not get a Hoover. I got me a dumb imitation version. I would kill, I guess all you need is to have the right amount of money to have a dog like that, right? So smart and majestic, right? Unfortunately, that's not always the case. It's kind of a crapshoot sometimes when you're getting animals. But here we have these shepherds. And as long as we've been together, my wife and I, we've always gotten cute but dumb dogs. Now, while shepherding has not changed much over its original times there, unlike a lot of other things that have changed, right? Technology's changed, the planes, all these different cars, the way that they've changed over the years and dramatically over a short period of time. It's not that, dirty shepherds were invited into a newborn delivery room that makes it so special. Now, that is special. That is kind of crazy. What mother who just gave birth wants a bunch of grubby, dirty, smelly shepherds to come walk into the delivery room, right? Probably not many. But that's not really even the most special part of the shepherd's perspective of the nativity story. It's that the shepherds got to play a part in any story at all. Because the thing about the shepherds in this culture, in this time, while we may think we don't interact with them much, we don't have appreciation, but we don't have a disdain for them. We know somewhere in the world they're doing their thing, and because of that, we have wool and can sleep warmer as a result. But in this culture, when Jesus enters the scene and is born, shepherds had dropped to the bottom socially in culture. They were right down as far as you could go. They had somehow earned the disdain of the religious leaders, and there's kind of this battle going on, and the religious leaders had all the power, so they were able to put shepherds in a place that they were not able to get out of. In fact, the religious leaders would refer to shepherds as sinners. That was one of the nicknames that they had for shepherds, was that they were sinners. And shepherds had been banned from being able to pasture their sheep and their goats in anywhere in Israel except for some of the desert plains surrounding, which for sheep is not very helpful to have just the desert plains. And in fact, the Mishnah, which is Judaism's written record of the oral law, reflects this prejudice that was found by the religious leaders. And it referred to shepherds in all sorts of belittling terms. In fact, one of the passages described them as being incompetent. And another one saying that you should never feel obligated to rescue a shepherd who had fallen into a pit. Right? This is the religious leaders, and this is how they're describing and how they're talking about shepherds. Shepherds had become deprived of all civil rights and liberties. In fact, they could not fulfill the judicial qualifications of being a witness in court, because they felt that they were dirty, they felt that they were liars, that they were thieves. In fact, they would say to buy wool and to buy milk from a shepherd was forbidden because there was an assumption that it was stolen property. So shepherds had fallen to this place of social outcasts. And there's this interesting relationship that they have with the religious leaders, because publicly the religious leaders would knock them and make fun of them and call them degrading names, while privately these sheep, and even these specifically these sheep and shepherds that we find in the nativity story, were probably the sheep that were used when the religious leaders performed their sacrificial duties to bring atonement for the sins of the people. So privately they needed this relationship, they needed this business set up to be able to purchase these sheep from these shepherds. But publicly, it was very much, you guys are scum, you guys are bottom of the earth, you do not even deserve to be saved if you fall or find yourself into some kind of situation needing them. In fact, the religious leaders of the day, they questioned, they wondered, they scratched their heads over Psalm 23. Psalm 23, very famously, the Lord is my shepherd, right? I shall not want. And the religious leaders of that day had no idea how in the world would David use shepherds in this kind of heroic type of way, use them as something to set an example for who God is. And it frustrated them. But you see, it wasn't always like this, the way the people felt towards shepherds. In fact, if you look through all of the Old Testament, there's a very rich history of shepherds, from Genesis really right from the beginning, Adam was the first shepherd. The book of Genesis describes all the animals really into three categories. It talks about the birds, it talks about the livestock, and it talks about the wild animals, and how Adam was called to look over the livestock. In Genesis 4, we have Cain and Abel, and Cain was someone who took care of the soil, and Abel was someone who took care of the flocks, the first shepherd. And then when God came to Abraham, Abram at the time was in fact a shepherd. In fact, he was such a good shepherd. The book of Genesis tells us how him and his nephew Lot, their pastures had gotten so big that they came to a place to say, man, some of your sheep are kind of coming into my pen, and some of mine are going into yours, and it's getting a little confusing. Things are getting too out of hand. You need to go one way, and we're going to go the other way, because our livestock, this shepherding business, is getting so successful. And then we see Jacob, a descendant of Abram, who goes and runs away and lives with his uncle Laban, and he's in charge of starting this new thing called shepherding. And he starts to work for the daughters of Laban to marry them, and Laban, eventually Jacob wants to leave, and Laban says, you've been doing such an amazing job with this new shepherding business. Would you just stay and work, and I'll pay you more. I'll give you more of your demands, but just keep doing what you're doing, because this shepherd thing is really taking off. And we see this rich history of shepherding. And then we kind of get a hint of there being some animosity towards shepherding when we look into the story of Joseph. If you're familiar with Joseph, Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, and he works his way up through Egypt, and then he kind of goes through this dramatic scene with his brothers. But it all leads to this point where Joseph is going to bring his family, all his brothers and his father, into Egypt so that they might survive the famine. There's going to be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. And God put Joseph strategically in this place to be able to manage food for the world during this time. And there's this very interesting interaction that we have between Joseph and his family around shepherding as they are going to be coming into Egypt. And it's found in Genesis chapter 46. It says, Joseph then spoke to his brothers and his father's family, and he says, I'll go and tell Pharaoh, my brothers and my father's family, all of whom lived in Canaan, have come to me. And these men, the men are shepherds. And they've always made their living by raising livestock. And they've brought their flocks and herds with them, along with everything else they own. When Pharaoh calls you in, he tells them, and asks you what kind of work you do, I want you to tell him that your servants have always kept livestock. And for as long as we can remember, we and our parents also, that way he'll let you stay apart in the area of Goshen. For Egyptians, and catch this, they look down on anyone who is a shepherd. And for the first time, we get that there's people in the world who kind of have this negative feeling towards this profession of shepherding. And this was very strategic, because what God didn't want to happen is he didn't want the Israelites to move into Egypt and just kind of get assimilated into Egyptian life. He wanted them to be separate. He didn't want them to marry together. He didn't want there to be, he wanted to keep Israel apart from the Egyptians. So there was this plan to say, brag about being shepherds, and when Pharaoh allows you in, he's going to be generous to allow you in, but he's going to keep you kind of in the outskirts. He's going to keep you guys separate, because the Egyptians hate and detest shepherds. Hate and detest this profession. And as a result, it was part of keeping Israel pure. And then after this, we have Moses. Moses comes on the scene, and when Moses leaves and flees from Egypt in Exodus chapter 2, what we find is Moses meets Jethro and marries one of Jethro's daughter, and he becomes a shepherd. And in fact, when we have the scene of the burning bush, it talks about how Moses was out tending the sheep when he saw the bush burning but not consumed. And we see Moses as a shepherd. And probably the most famous shepherd that we see is David, right? David was actually out in the fields taking care of the animals while his brothers and dad were at home trying to find the next king. And the prophet was like, no, it's none of these. Is there someone else in the family? And they're like, well, there's the one. There's the runt of the litter, but he's out in the fields tending the sheep. The very noble profession of shepherding. But then something happens. The centuries of exile and the centuries of silence from the Old Testament to the New Testament had left this bad taste in the religious leaders' mouths, and all of a sudden, they're doing everything that they can to downgrade shepherds to next to nothing socially. In society, you don't do any kind of business with shepherds because they're cheats, because they're thieves, because they're breaking the law. And somewhere along the line, they had formed this new animosity, this kind of new identity of hatred towards shepherds. And here is the angels bringing this message to these shepherds to be some of the first people to bear witness to this nativity story. Right? Of course, we had the Magi and what happened through them and how they got to be there. But here's this one group of very noble people throughout the course of biblical history, the shepherds, who kind of got left behind. And everyone else kind of got comfortable, kind of was okay with the way that there was this separation between this dirty, sometimes boring profession of shepherding. And in that void rose up this new religion in Israel. And really, religion is just anything that makes demands of you outside of a relationship with God. And that's where the religious leaders had gotten to, where you know it's all about following the rules and how good at following the rules could you be. And we're going to set the tone for who's acceptable and who's not acceptable. And in the list of unacceptable, the shepherds are low man on the totem pole. But even through all that work of trying to do that, you couldn't get away from the roots that shepherding plays in the story that Jesus has been building since Genesis. There was something about how shepherding was formational in their lives and who they would become as individuals, Moses and David, but who the nation would become that they had gotten away from. And that's why it was very symbolic that Jesus chose, as part of his story, to first invite these angels, these shepherds, into the nativity story. And in the same way that sometimes we're formed by the things that we go through, and you can look around in this season, for many of us, we've been formed into Christmas being this month of buying a bunch of things on a list for people that are going to wind up in the closet a week later, and gotten away from the celebration of Jesus moving into the neighborhood. You see, there's all sorts of things that we do that are forming us, either to be more like Christ or to be more like the world around us. And we have to ask ourselves the hard question: are we being formed more like him through December and through our Christmas? Or is the forming that is happening actually undermining the forming that God has wanted to do? Because the things that you do over and over again eventually just become habits. And we do them because that's the way that it's always been done, because it's always been done that way. But it can also work in the positive. We can choose to say, you know what, that there's something that we need to change in our lifestyle that we believe God is calling us to do that's going to reform us to look more like him. And I believe that is the goal that Jesus puts into place here by inviting these shepherds into the most important story, the birth of Jesus. That they would be allowed to be the first witnesses, the first participants. Because there's some things that shepherds and shepherding does that forms inside of me and can form inside of you if we choose to allow it to. So if you're taking notes this morning, first thing I see is that shepherding, it forms us into being brave. If you're familiar with David David was the young shepherd boy. He already had been anointed king, but he is called on to bring food and supplies to his brothers who are fighting these really bad arch enemies, the Philistines, right? And one particular big guy, kind of a bad dude, his name was, you remember? Goliath, right? Yeah, we're all there. Goliath, and he hears all these things that Goliath is saying, making a mockery of God, making a mockery of the people of Israel, and he sees all of Israel just hiding and being scared and no one choosing to defend God. And something inside him gets riled up and he says, isn't anybody going to do anything? So he says, me, I'll do it. I'll go and do it. So they bring him before King Saul, and King Saul looks at him and kind of sizes him up and is like, let's get you some armor. So he brings out his own personal armor, and David's literally like swimming in this armor. And David's like, I can't do it with the armor. And Saul's thinking, you know what, this is not a good idea. And he asks David, why do you think that you can do this? And David's response in 1 Samuel, he says, you know what, I've been a shepherd, tending sheep for my father. And whenever a lion or bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I'd go after it. I say, oh, no, you didn't. And I would knock it down, and I'd rescue the lamb. And if it turned on me, I'd grab it by the throat, wring its neck, and kill it. Lion or bear, it made no difference. I killed it. Man, when I read that description of a shepherd, it kind of blows up my perception of what a shepherd is. You see, in our culture, we think, man, we need more soldiers. We need more people who are going to stand up and fight and just bring people to their knees. But the reality is, we need more shepherds. Or we need more people who've lived this profession, who've lived this way of life, where now they're being formed that despite being out-muscled by a bear or a lion, despite being out, sharp-toothed, that in the end, it doesn't matter if I survive. What matters is that I do the right thing, and I'm going to be brave in that instance. And something about David and this constant just being faithful in the fields, growing attached to these cute, dumb sheep, that when the lion came, when the bear came, it didn't matter. He was going to go after it and bring it back. Right? We talked about a couple weeks ago when we were talking about leaving the 99, right? It makes more sense to just consider an investment, right? Like the lion and the bear is the mafia, and they just come to collect their weekly pay, right? Just let it go. It's not worth it. Even if he didn't die and just got hurt really bad, like it's not worth it to go through that. Just let him have the one sheep. We'll have more. They multiply. But that's not what forms inside of you when you're a shepherd. The forming that happens inside of you is you say, I've been entrusted with each and every one of these animals. And I'm going to get to know them, and I'm going to know them by name, and I'm going to be able to talk to them, and they're going to hear my voice and respond. And sometimes, I'm going to have to use my staff and kind of give them a little yank. But this forming happens inside, that when something drastic like a bear or a lion comes along, it doesn't matter. I'm going after it, and I'm going to kill it if I have to. And that same forming that happened in the fields day after day for David allowed him to say, I don't need the armor. I got my slingshot. I got a few smooth stones, and I am not going to allow this pig to make a mockery of God. And he was formed into this brave, I think, we think bravery, man, we think it's brave to bring our Bible to schools. We think it's brave to get a bullhorn and maybe go down on the corner of the street and read scriptures and tell people about their sins. We think that's brave. But the reality is bravery is choosing to practice witness with the world suffering from loneliness. To practice witness with a group of stupid sheep faithfully day after day, and to pour yourselves out for them. That's what bravery really looks like, and that's what shepherding forms inside of us when we give ourselves over to shepherding. The other thing that shepherding forms in us is being content. Right? Being content with wherever God has called you, wherever God has placed you. We talked about Moses. When Moses was tending the flock, when he saw the burning bush, he had spent 40 years of his life. The first 40 years of Moses' life was spent living in the lap of luxury in Egypt. Being able to take advantage of all the things that a royal person in Egypt had to offer. And then he decides that he's going to try to be a part of rescuing his people from Egypt, and he fails miserably, and he's on the run, and he leaves. And for the next 40 years of his life, Moses, the great deliverer of Egypt, was first a shepherd for 40 years. You see, for 40 years of his life, there was all sorts of forming that happened in him that caused him to think that I can just short-circuit God's plan and I can just solve it with my fists. I can just kill this Egyptian who's beaten up on this Israelite, and I can fix things. But then he finds himself on the run, and for 40 years, there's a new forming that had to happen in his life. And in the loneliness of shepherding out in the wilderness, with just his thoughts and the dumb sheep, reforming began to happen inside of Moses. He spent 40 years in obscurity tending the sheep. I mean, we think of Moses and we think of, Charlton Heston and let my people go, right? Talking to Pharaoh, leading the people in the wilderness, all the amazing things that he was able to see and accomplish. But the 40 years of obscurity is kind of like a blip in the story, and we don't really think about what was happening in his life, where for 40 years he just woke up and just tended and shepherded these dumb sheep. You see, because it requires an equal amount of time to reform inside of us some of the bad things that have been formed in us. Man, we would love, and sometimes God does supernaturally just like zap us and make us who we need to be. But other times, more often than not, you need to begin the journey of allowing God to reform you. You may have had a year, you may have had dozens of years where you've been living a certain way and going after the flesh and the things that you wanted to go after. And then one morning maybe you came and you think, okay, I want to give this God thing a chance. And that week was the worst week you ever had. And you think, man, this God thing must not be real. But the truth is, the principle we see here is that it requires an equal amount of time to allow God to work in you and these things out of you, the flesh out of you. So if you've given decades of your life to addiction, there's a good chance that there's some decades of life you have where you're going to wrestle. Maybe some years of winning, but also maybe some seasons of feeling like a failure. But what shepherding does inside of us, if we allow it to wake up the next morning, to put my little shepherd sandals on, get my shepherd staff, and do it again, even if I don't feel like it, even if I resent it, that we believe that there's something happening, a forming that is happening inside that is undoing the work of the enemy that has been allowed to happen in my life. And I pray and I wish that it would happen supernaturally for every single person. But sometimes, like Paul, who prayed 3 times, God, would you just remove this thorn from my flesh? Would you just get rid of this thing? My ministry could be so much better if you just got rid of it. And God says it's not about the ministry you can accomplish. It's about the forming that's happening inside of you. And my grace, Paul, is going to be enough for you. My grace to allow you to walk through this is going to be enough for you. And we don't know how long, if it was for the rest of his life or for a season of years, that Paul wrestled with this thorn. But he took God up on his promise, not that he was going to remove it, but that his grace was going to be enough to help him walk through it. A forming that happens when we assume the role of shepherding. A role that in Jesus' day was bottom of the rung. A role that today we probably don't think about too often, but I believe is invited into the story as a reminder for you and a reminder for me that when we give ourselves over to this very noble, God-ordained profession of shepherding, there's something that can happen inside of us that makes us brave, that helps us be content, and the work goes on. You know, one of the hardest lessons that I'm still learning is about allowing people sometimes to lead before they're ready. Sometimes we have a very, we don't have, hoops you have to jump through. We don't have a lot of red tape here because we just want people to be able to do what God's called them to do. But sometimes that means we find ourselves in positions where people's abilities, you put them in a place that is too big for their character. And sometimes the foundation is not quite there yet, and it blows up sometimes, and it gets nasty sometimes, and nothing is more painful than to see those relationships sour, and it hurts, and it's painful. But what I begin to see is that it's usually this pattern where people did not allow themselves to be given over to the forming process of just being content with serving. With just being content of taking the lowliest spot of like a shepherd out, apart from society, with nobody to talk to except for these cute little dumb animals. And there's something that is formed inside. And I tell you, the people who rise up and have longevity are the people who've gone through seasons where they said, I don't care about the titles, I don't care about the position, I don't care about anything other than just how can I serve? How can I be used? Tell me what you need. And through that, something formational is happening inside of them that I believe is part of why these shepherds were part of the story. And I'm so grateful for some of the time of obscurity that I've been able to experience, that has helped bring me to my knees to ask God, man, I thought we were going to do these great things. And he's like, dude, you need to grow some contentment. And that happens through giving ourselves over to shepherding, right? So much so Moses gets to a place where he says, God, I don't know if I can be your guy because I can't even talk. Like my words get all mumbled and jumbled and nobody's going to be able to understand me. And Moses is like, it's not about you. Right? I can make up the difference. What happened, what was important was that we have this time to work out of you Egypt. Egypt had to be worked and formed out of you. And we've had this opportunity to now you're a clean slate. And if you'll let me, I'll make up the difference. And Moses is still like, but I can't talk. So God says, all right, I'll give you Aaron, and you guys can do it together. But I will make up the difference. Because it's not about you. It's about me. And giving yourself over to this process of shepherding. And it becomes a beautiful thing. And lastly, this morning, shepherding, it forms us into being sacrificial. Sacrifice is this idea of, we've talked about over the past few weeks, pouring ourselves out, right? It's not pouring out the leftovers. It's not seeing, what remains. Okay, we'll dump that off at our local donation center. But it's about saying you start with the very best that you have to offer. The first fruits that you have. And you give it back. You pour it out. And we see this all the way back in the book of Genesis. We talked about Cain and Abel, and we see this story play out between these two brothers, one who was a shepherd and one who was a gardener, who had a green thumb. And it plays out this way in Genesis chapter 4. It says that Abel was a herdsman and Cain a farmer. Right? There's something forming about shepherding, something that's been happening in Abel's heart as he's been looking over the livestock. Cain, he's just been planting things and watering it, and it grows and he eats it. There's not really anything formational that has been happening because of what happens. Time had passed, and it was time to bring an offering to God. So Cain brought an offering to God from the produce of his farm. Now that isolated by itself, we think, well, what's the big deal? Cain's bringing an offering to God. That seems like a good thing. But we see he brings it, and then Abel also brought an offering, and here's one of those big buts. Now, normally in the Bible, I love big buts. This is one of those situations where it's not such a good big butt. Because it says, but from the firstborn animals of his herd, the choice cut of meats. And the author of Genesis makes plain this difference between the two, that Cain had just brought this offering of some of his produce. But Abel said, you know what, I'm bringing my firstborn. Culturally, the firstborn was the best. It had the blessing of the firstborn. It had its own special place in society. He's bringing the firstborn of the animals, and of the firstborn, he's bringing the choice cuts of meats. How many meat eaters do we have out here? Any? Yeah, a bunch of sickos. I'm not a big meat eater. I don't like, a lot of red meats. I feel bad because the way you feel towards steak and filet mignon, I feel towards mashed potatoes. Like that's my currency exchange there, and I always feel bad when there's steak that is available because I'm thinking, man, there's people in the world who would give anything for steak, and I'm just like, it's chewy and it's just like, yuck, right? It's sad. In fact, growing up, one of my best friends, Zach, his father owned a mobile gas station, and it was my first job. And they would invite me over sometimes for dinner. And the first time I went over, they had steak. And he made it, and I talked about never really having steak before. And they asked how I enjoyed it, and I said, oh, it was great. I loved it. Because that's how I knew everyone else who ever talked about steak talked about it, right? They're like, oh, it's the best thing ever. So I was like, it was the best thing ever. Every time I got invited over for dinner, guess what we had? Steak. In fact, they named it Jimmy Steak. Right? Jimmy's coming over for Jimmy Steak. We're going to have Jimmy Steak. And in my mind, I was thinking, like, I can't tell them how I really feel about steak. It's not that I was disgusted by it or didn't like it. I just felt bad because other people in the world love steak so much, and I could care less about it. Just give me some mashed potatoes or a baked potato, right? Some French fries or a taco. Give me a taco. But steak, not a big deal. Abel, he brings the choice meats, the filet mignon, the whatever you would go out and pay $60 for at a steakhouse. That's what he brings to God. His very best. And what happened is God liked Abel and his offering, but Cain and his offering didn't get his approval. Cain lost his temper and went into sulk, and most of us probably know how that story ends. But this is not a picture into, God's dietary preferences. We're not getting a picture here that God, loves steak and he didn't like to eat his vegetables. He didn't like his broccoli. Right, what we're getting a picture here is that God would have been more than happy to love both of their offerings. But it wasn't about what they were bringing. It was about their hearts. And something about this shepherd who chose to bring one of these animals that he'd probably named, that he probably grew attached to, that he probably loved because this one was a firstborn. This was a smart one. This one actually listened. This was the Hoover of the bunch. But when it came time to bring an offering to God, not only did he have to just choose to bring this animal, he had to sacrifice. to dig in and to pull out the best meats of this animal, he was going to have to kill it. And in Genesis chapter 4, killing is not a common thing like it is for you and I. Right? We hear news articles every morning about somebody new who is murdered or killed. Genesis chapter 4, that's not a common occurrence. In fact, the first occurrence of that actually happening was just a few verses beforehand. In Genesis chapter 3, when sin entered the world, and immediately Adam and Eve, they felt shame because they were naked. And as a result, what did God do? He made them some clothes. Where do you think he got the skin for those clothes? At some point, as a result of their actions, and now these feelings that they had, before he was going to deal with the sin issue, right? And eventually he's going to lay out a list of consequences for their actions. The first thing he does, he says, I'm going to address this shame issue. Because right now, Adam and Eve, they feel shame. And we're going to address it. And to address it, what he had to do is he had to take one of these animals that Adam was in charge of looking over and shepherding, and he's got to kill it. And for the first time, they see an animal that's alive, and they see the life drain out of it. For the first time, they see what happens when you cut too deep and the blood is just going where it won't stop. And they're face to face with the consequences of their actions that God does to address the shame in their life. And I would imagine it came with some tears, some sobbing, to think that something else would have to go through that kind of experience just so what I'm feeling right now can be absolved. That's exactly what happens. And here, just a few verses later, I'm assuming the same thoughts from the stories that mom and dad had told them about these first pieces of clothes that they have. And here's Abel raising up this little animal to a teenage animal, to a full adult animal, and coming to this place when it's time to choose what I'm going to give God, despite the pain, despite the sadness, despite the tears. I'm going to give God my best. And what shepherding does in you and in me is it can form us into being sacrificial. Where there's not things in this world that have such a hold on us that we're not willing to let go of them. Abel is not a butcher. This is not something he does for a living where he's just cutting up animals. He's a shepherd who loves and lives for his animals. But he sacrifices, gives his best, tears, sobbing. Quite the contrast from a Cain who just threw together a veggie platter with some brown spots. And we would see this play out over and over again. Abraham, another shepherd, when finally given his son Isaac, one of the first things God asks Abraham to do is to sacrifice Isaac. Right after all the drama of 100 years old and no sibling, no son to be able to be this great and mighty nation. Finally, there's an offspring, and now, God, you want me to sacrifice it? And I can't even imagine the journey that must have happened as Abraham's thinking through all the things that he would love to say or to be able to stop this, to maybe say, God, can I sacrifice myself? The pictures of going through his mind of what he's going to have to do. And as he's putting Isaac on the altar, just before he's about to sacrifice his son, what happens? God stops him and he provides the sacrifice. And biblical scholars, they believe that where this took place, where Abraham was about to sacrifice his son, they believe is the same spot where Jesus would eventually be crucified for you and me. Right? There's something very forming that happens when we give ourselves over to the process of shepherding. And what Jesus is doing through the nativity stories, he's redeeming the profession of shepherding. The idea, the lifestyle of shepherding, because it had gotten a very dark place. Much like today, we've gotten to a very dark place. Even our religion and our faith has become very me-centered. Right? We all know John 10:10. Who knows John 10:10? Maybe if I said, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, right? But I've come that you might have life everlasting. We have this idea that it's just this battle between us and Satan, and Satan's always out to get us, but God wants us just to be happy. But nobody knows John 10:11, right? John 10:11, he says, but I am the good shepherd. And the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. And this is what I'm going to do for you, and this is what I'm calling you to do for others. And in fact, he goes into this idea that there's hired hands. You have a hired hand, and they're not going to lay down their life. A hired hand, as soon as the trouble comes, as soon as the opposition comes, as soon as the bear or the lion comes, man, the hired hand, he's out. He's gone. But I'm not a hired hand. He says, I am the good shepherd. And I lay down my life for the sheep. And is it possible that in 2023 we have forgotten, just like they forgot in that Bethlehem morning, what it means to follow the calling of being a shepherd? And we've lost out on the time of what shepherding does and forms inside of us for the world that we live in. It's possible we've forgotten what it means, because it's possible that there's a difference between a decent shepherd and a good shepherd. And a decent shepherd, he probably takes care of the sheep and makes sure that he gets fed occasionally. But the good shepherd lays down his life. The good shepherd begins to raise up other good shepherds. And Jesus did that through the disciples, and the disciples did that through the early church. And the early church did that through everything that brings us to where we are today and what we have today. But maybe we also have gotten too content, have forgotten about the heart of the good shepherd, forgotten how these guys, when given the story, man, they just dropped everything that financially made sense. All the sheep, they just dropped it and left, and that just a casual stroll, but they were running, and they found Mary and Joseph and the baby lying in the manger. And seeing, man, it was believing, and they couldn't help but just tell everyone that they met, whoever they saw, what the angels had said about this child. And all who heard the shepherds were impressed. Man, people don't get impressed by shepherds. People don't even listen to shepherds. But Mary, she kept all these things to herself, holding them dear, deep within herself. And the shepherds returned, and they let loose, glorifying and praising God for everything that they had heard and seen. And it turned out exactly the way that they had been told. You see, hired hands, they don't let loose. They don't glorify. They don't praise. Hired hands are just in it because it's a paycheck. Because it's, if they want to get some dough at the end of the week, then they got to go through the motions. Hired hands don't do that, but shepherds who've just poured everything out, who have no sheep left, maybe a few, but know that God is doing something, and they have been invited into the story. They can't help it. And what Jesus is showing us is that there's a new way to be shepherds. Jesus is bringing shepherding back. After Jesus had died and risen, the disciples were kind of left aimless and not real sure of what to do, of their next steps. So they did only what they thought came to mind. We're going to go back to our original professions. We're going to go back to fishing. And they get in a boat and they go into the water and they just start fishing. And as they're out on the water, they see on the shore that there are some smoke and someone having a little bonfire. And immediately Peter says, it's the master, and he just jumps in off the boat and goes after to be back with his master that he had denied and turned his back on. And as he's having this very intimate conversation, Peter and Jesus, in this point where he kind of abandoned everything Jesus had taught him up to that point, Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, yes. Then Jesus tells him to do what? Feed my sheep. I know you spent most of your life being a fisherman, but I want you to feed my sheep. A second time, Peter, do you love me? Yes, Jesus, I do. Then feed my sheep, Peter. Become a shepherd. A third time, Peter, do you love me? And finally, Peter's just exasperated. Jesus, you know that I love you. And again, he just says, then feed my sheep. In Forward Point, you and I are called to find ourselves in the nativity story, and I believe it's through the reclaiming of being a shepherd. And as we do that, inside of us is going to begin to form things like bravery, things like contentment, things like sacrifice. Things that the world looks at the church and that's not what it sees. It looks at supposed people who claim to love God and that's not what it sees. But this Christmas 2023 can be a season where the nativity story comes alive to us in a way that it never has. But first, inside of us, there's a work that has to be done. This morning, my mom sent me a text that they weren't going to be here this morning because they weren't feeling well, but that at some point overnight, that Ginger attempted to have a fourth puppy. A good 12 hours after the first 3, and as hard as they tried, this fourth puppy did not survive this morning. And she sent me a little tear emoji. And here's a puppy that my parents have never met, a puppy that you've never met, a puppy I've never met, but still we feel the weight of death and sacrifice and loss. Right? There's something about being part of that birthing process that happens as a shepherd, as you see the animals and you see, man, nothing has changed me in my life like being there when my firstborn was there and I was there and I caught little Justice Joy. That messes you up in the best way possible. And there's something that we need to find ourselves back in this humble, lowly position of being a shepherd, where we're able to walk through the hurts and the pains of loss and death. We don't just have token phrases, but we have tears as we sit with people. We don't have just token phrases, but instead we sacrifice and we pour out the very best that we have first, and not just the leftovers. So this morning, would you join me in finding our place again? in the very noble calling of being like Jesus, the great shepherd, the good shepherd who lays down his life. God, we are so grateful that in this Christmas nativity, you remind us, you invite us, you call us back to not just spectate from a distance and watch it up on a screen or watch it on the pages as they flip, but you call us to find ourselves. And you search us and you look deep inside of us to see if there's some things that have to be unformed inside of us. And use something like lowly, minor characters like the shepherds to awaken us to a new way of living that you're calling us to. So God, would you help us this morning to enter into our place as your shepherds, to watch over our families, to live and to care for our workplaces, to pour ourselves out for our neighborhoods and our blocks. Would you continue to work inside of us to be the good shepherd for Eastwood and for Syracuse and for Central New York? God, would you show us just how to feed your sheep? And would you allow this nativity season to be a season that forever leaves an impact on us, that we will choose to no longer allow the culture around us to form us into what Christmas is, but God, quietly and reverently, that we are just going to swim upstream. We're just going to live counterculture and begin to undo from within as you form inside of us a new reason for the season, a new reason for our life. Help us to respond to you this morning through these songs that we get to sing, that they would be songs that we use to ask and invite you into forming us to be different as we leave than as we came. We love you.
Oh come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appears. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Come, Emmanuel. Oh, come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, 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 Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. drive away the shades of night and pierce the clouds and bring us light. Rejoice, 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 Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Oh, come, desire of nations bind all people in one heart and mind. Bid envy, strife, and quarrel cease. Fill all the world with heaven's peace. Rejoice, 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 Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Rejoice, 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 Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Rejoice, 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 Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Shall come to thee, O Israel. Pour out your power and holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. For unto us a child is born. We sing holy, holy, holy. For unto us a child is born. We sing holy, holy, holy. For unto us a child is born. We sing holy, holy, holy. For unto us a child is born. We sing holy, holy, holy.
What stood out to you this morning, Miliano?
The model of a shepherd, being brave, content, and sacrificial. And immediately the first thing I thought was Jesus. And he was brave to stand up for those who were deemed as outcasts and sinners. He was content to do the will of his Father, and he was sacrificial in everything he did. He left his deity to come down and dwell among us as Emmanuel. He became sin, even though he knew no sin. And he did what Jimmy shared in John chapter 10, 11. He laid down his life for the sheep. And that's what we're called to do. And I didn't have a name for it. It's something I tried to pursue in my life. Don't always achieve it, but I pursue it, and that's to be a shepherd and let that form inside of me.
As all of you know, or should know by now, I've been given the amazing gift of running Love Handles, and this morning I was struck with the feeling of how do I continue to change from just being hired help to being that shepherd, or taking on Love Handles and taking on that amazing experience and feeling that I'm grown up enough to do that, or in believing in my ability and asking God to take me away and put him into me. So again, just asking him in this season, show me continued ways to not just feel like this is just a job, but an opportunity to be his hands and feet. And every day I get to go to work. So struggling with that this morning and how I do that. So, yeah. Again, if you're new to Forward Point or if you're joining us online, thank you. We appreciate you coming and supporting and stepping into a new community of faith. We want you to get connected with us many ways: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the Church Center app. Just get plugged in all of the different ways. What are some things we have looking forward to coming up? We want to invite for our big party on Christmas Eve. Please join us for that. And if this is your home church or your community of faith, what are some ways that we can give today?
Oh, there's 4 ways you can give today. You can give in person. There's a giving box in the back. You can text any amount to 84321. You can donate on the Church Center app, which is my favorite way to do it. Or you can go online to forwardpoint.org/give.
Again, our prayer team is available all throughout service, in the morning, during service, and after service. They did move the prayer corner again. It's going to be in the back corner over there, stage left. I don't know my right from my left, but over there, right behind the welcome desk. They will pray with you about anything and everything. So if there's something heavy on your heart this morning, don't leave without speaking with one of them. And as always, we want to thank the Palace for allowing us to be here this morning. So if you could grab a broom or empty some trash cans, if you have a few extra minutes, please join us at the back closet. And last but not least, don't forget your kids today. All right, thank you.
Today about Jimmy, if I was to offer you a filet mignon, that would be a big mistake. Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
He leaned over and he said, "Can I share something? That's the last time."
creation groans for a world in darkness, frozen like a stone. Light is breaking in the stable for a throne. Sing with us. And he shall reign forevermore, forevermore. And he shall reign forevermore, forevermore. Unto us a child is born, the King of kings and Lord of lords. And he shall reign forevermore, forevermore. If I were a wise man, and I would travel far. If I were a shepherd, and I would do my part. But poor as I am, I would give to him my heart, and he shall reign forevermore, forevermore. And he shall reign forevermore, forevermore. Unto us a child is born, the King of kings and Lord of lords. And he shall reign forevermore, forevermore. Here within, and here within who made you lies, the one who made the starry skies. This baby born for sacrifice, Christ the Messiah. Into our hopes, into our fears,